Hello and welcome to another medicine show. So last time I was talking about plants that are growing in the woods right now, and if you watched that video you may have noticed that a lot of them were not really the best sorts of plants for a beginning herbalist or forager. They were things that grow in a more specialized habitat and so forth. Some of them had some toxicity and things like that. So I wanted to do another one talking about plants that grow in an urban environment, things that you would be likely to find in yards, parks, open fields, that sort of thing. This is really important information for people to know because these plants live where you live. They live among people instead of away from people. And I think that there has been a tendency for many centuries for certain aspects of herbal medicine to focus on exotic herbs that were not easy for everybody to get, because that would be something that the professional could offer that not everybody could. But I also think that it's important to look at, and it's also been something that another aspect of herbal medicine has very much focused on over the centuries, which is what is available to common people. Now, I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to have social upheaval or collapse in our lifetime, but that is something that happens every few generations. You know, it's the sort of thing that happens not all over the world at once, just here and there in different places. There's conflict, there's economic issues and so forth, and supply lines can get interrupted. But the weeds are pretty much always going to be with you, unless there's so many people in a small area that they're trampling them out of existence. So most of the plants that you're going to see on this episode are things that anybody can use, that don't require a lot of expertise. They aren't things that are very environmentally sensitive, and they are good things to know in a situation where there isn't anywhere else to turn to, which is a kind of situation that I've been in myself in my life, where there was no access to any more definitive level of care than what I was able to provide myself. And it's not the best situation to be in, but that's life. It happens sometimes. And so these are very accessible herbs, and they're very versatile and useful herbs. And so I hope that you'll enjoy this episode of The Medicine Show. This is a pretty standard patch of weeds that you might find in an urban environment here in Eastern North America. You might find very similar weeds in similar latitudes in Europe or Asia as well. I wanted to talk about some of the plants that grow here, and this is just like basically a regular neglected urban landscape, someplace that hasn't been mowed or hasn't had poison dropped on it or anything like that. One of the most common and familiar things you're going to see is this one right here, the dandelion. The leaves of the dandelion are used to stimulate the kidneys. They're edible when they're very small. When they get bigger, they're too bitter to eat, but you can make a bitter tea out of them. The root of the dandelion is also used for the liver because of its bitterness. So it's a diuretic, and it's also what might be called a choleretic, something that makes bile flow out of the liver. And then we have some bitter cress here. This is edible. Most people don't like it all that much because it is sort of a bitter, spicy flavor. I'm used to it, so I'm actually pretty fond of it. This one I talked about a little bit yesterday. This is henbit, which is mild medicinal, and it's edible. When it's used medicinally, it helps some with inflammation in the lungs, helps to make the lungs less reactive, less sensitive. Let's see. This is wild garlic, sometimes also called wild onion. It is, it's hollow. Oh, there we go. It's hollow. Sometimes it's curly up at the ends. It smells and tastes like garlic, and it can be used like garlic for fighting bacterial infections and for lowering the blood pressure and for breaking up congestion as well. So it has all of these wonderful medicinal properties, and there's some more of it. There's a bunch more of it. It is absolutely everywhere in the typical urban landscape. It tends to be a lot taller than the grasses around it, and at this time of year, because it gets to start growing earlier in the winter, and like I said, it's hollow rather than being a solid blade, and it smells and tastes like garlic. This plant is Lepidium, poor man's pepper, and it's got sort of almost heart-shaped seed pods, and the leaves are further down here. It's spicy, has a mustardy taste to it. It's traditionally used for indigestion and to break up congestion as well, and to induce sweating because it's kind of spicy. These are violets. They have just started to bloom here in my region. These ones, not all of them, but many of them have a sort of a heart-shaped leaf, and then all of them have 4 similar sized petals and then one other thing called a spur. Violets contain, all parts of the plant contain salicylates and soluble fiber, which, so the salicylates are anti-inflammatory, the soluble fiber is soothing, so it can be used for headaches, fever, body aches, and pains. It can also be used for upset stomach and diarrhea. So it's a very useful herb with a lot of different uses. It'll probably get its own episode of the medicine show at some point. But this is a really good herb to know, and it grows in a lot of places. This plant right here is called Plantago. If you are only going to know one medicinal herb for the impending collapse of society, this would be a good one to know. It's a great herb to poultice on wounds. Everything from bee stings and splinters to, in the course of my practice, I've had occasion to use it on knife wounds, shrapnel wounds, bruises, burns, all kinds of things. It contains some anti-inflammatory and astringent substances, some soothing polysaccharides, and it does a great job of relieving symptoms and helping the healing process to happen. Here is a better look at the plantain. You can see that it has long, skinny leaves with veins that run the length of the leaf, and it grows in a cluster of leaves like this. That's all for this time, and if you've enjoyed what you've just watched, then I would appreciate it if you would like, share, follow, and tell your friends about it. And I'll see you next time on The Medicine Show.